Chapter 28 of Jewel Sowers by Edith Allonby. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain, read by Christine Rottger. Revenge is sweet. The next day, this particular city of Lucifram was buzzing. The great election was coming off, yet there was no doubt who was winning. Golden Priest Alfonso had regained his old popularity. When the poll was read at night, he headed the list. The people received it with shouts of acclamation. In other circles, the news was as well received. He was barely 40. A precedent was established. He was the youngest great high priest in the record of time. But our history is not so much with public events as private persons, and we return once more to Susie Bell and her friend Miss Groggerton. Neither of them had been at the great dinner, but the one had heard from her father, and the other read from the paper the trend of general events. "And," said Susie Bell with pious horror, "to admit right out she'd been into the most sacred place, a place no woman has ever been in before. Such impudent boldness is enough to make one's hair stand on end. She's a disgrace to our sex. If I meet her in the street with the emperor himself, I'd turn my head away." As this was never likely to be, Susie Bell was very safe. "Yes, but what I can't understand is Mr. Barrancourt's conduct," said Miss Groggerton. "I hear that he defended her, or the next best thing, made everyone laugh, and then serious at the same time." Miss Groggerton was green when she said it, but Susie Bell became greener. "Pa says no right-minded woman would care to hear her conduct made the subject of open criticism, and if she'd had a ha'porth of modesty, she'd have kept her tongue still. But I know the kind she is. Those pug-nosed women are all alike, pushing themselves to the front if they have to pay body and soul for it. Have you seen Brother James Peter yet?" "Yes. He called the day before yesterday, and I explained to him about her. He was to be at the dinner last night, so he would see her." Just at this moment, in accordance with the old proverb, Brother James Peter made his appearance. He has been previously introduced to the reader at the beginning of this book. Once Brother James Peter fell over a footstool and got lost in the dark, was laughed at by his brother priests, and to this day heard occasional remarks made about his conduct. He remembered very well the source of his misfortunes, and had again scented the innocent cause of them all. He was the first to hiss last night, proving himself to be a true crossbreed of the serpent. Today he came in as one with news. He had given his vote. For him the day's work was over. "You look pale, Sir Priest," said Miss Groggerton, who would have called up the devil to prove him another behind his back. "The events of last night have distracted me," he cried, sitting down, and Miss Groggerton rang for his favorite collation of whiskey and ham sandwiches. "Tell us, is it true?" they both cried as the provisions were being prepared without. "That woman is in the power of the evil one," said he solemnly, "and the sooner that little squat animal is taken by the hind leg and cast into the fire, the better." "Yes, indeed," said Miss Groggerton in joyful anticipation of slaughter. "I believe it's that frog that gets her a reputation for beauty, loathsome little thing." And Susie Bell shivered and then laughed. "Listen to me," said James Peter, raising his fat finger. "Make none of your own little spiteful remarks, but listen to me." Being a priest, he spoke as one in authority, and the women submitted. "That woman," said he, "is a dangerous and unprincipled character. 3 years ago, listen carefully, she came into our temple and pretended to be drunk. Dumb, I mean. She used to come and kneel up close to the crimson curtain, and I believe she contaminated it and made it rot. She used to look up at me with her lovely eyes. She has lovely eyes, Mademoiselle Susie Bell, whatever you may think, and point to her lips and shake her head. And I used to pity her. She gave me to understand she was praying for the gift of speech." Here the women laughed shrilly, shook with laughing, as he had laughed long since. "But that," continued he, "was all a ruse. She was waiting her opportunity to slip inside the curtain, eaten up with preternatural and unwomanly curiosity. But one afternoon, as it was getting dusk, I went into the choir stalls to get a psalter that I needed, and thought I heard a curious sound coming out from the sacred place. I could not understand it. I hid myself in the shadow of the carved screen, suspecting theft and recognizing sacrilege. A little later, out came this woman carrying a light. I know not where she got it from, but seeing me, she ran all down the nave at quickest speed, I following. You caught her? The devil helped her. She escaped, and at the door she turned right round and put her tongue right out at me and said, "Did you ever know a woman who couldn't talk if she wanted to? You have the story in a nutshell. And you never reported it?" 3 hours afterwards, I was as one imprisoned in a living grave for 3 long weary hours. But did you not tell? Yes, and the great high priest would not believe me. He laughed. That was the beginning of all his troubles. He was too lax, they say. Under the new regime there will be greater strictness. And he sighed. Why, she's a witch, an impudent, underbred thing, said Susie Bell excitedly. Have you told Mr. Barencourt? I am not personally acquainted with him, but last night, from the way he spoke, one might almost have thought he was excusing her. Of course, there was no putting out of the tongues or giving pert answers last night. She spoke as meek and as mildly as you please. If it hadn't come from the mouth of a clergyman, I wouldn't have believed it of her, said Miss Groggerton, glad to have such a reliable source of information. But, continued Susie Bell, isn't there a severe punishment for going inside the curtain for a woman? It used to be to have her tongue torn out. Who will do it? Who will do it? No one will do it nowadays. The biggest punishment would be a fine. Pawn a few jewels, it's done in no time. She doesn't worship the serpent at all. She worships that little blinking frog, said Miss Groggerton. Well, I've got my eye on her, and if there are any heathenish practices going on, you may be sure I will report them before long, said he, and soon afterwards got up to go. That same night, when all the wear and tear and excitement of the day were over, and all the cabs had rattled home, and all the theaters been closed, the new great high priest sat in an armchair in Mr. Barencourt's study, whilst the owner sat in his accustomed one beside the table. Sacred priest Alfonso was white and haggard, and the deep lines on his face showed the strain that he had passed through. His arms hung heavily on the arms of the chair. His eyes were fixed on the carpet. Mr. Barencourt was writing a letter. When he had finished it, he sealed it and tossed it on the table, then bent his eyes upon his guest, as a doctor sometimes does upon an uncertain patient he treats as an experiment. Without saying anything, he got up and went to a side table and poured out 2 glasses of red wine. One he filled, the other only half, then turned his head round and looked at the priest. Still he sat in the same weary lethargy. A smile curved Mr. Barencourt's lips. Very far gone, he muttered, and filled the glass. Then he took it across and offered it to him. He took it carelessly and drank all the contents. Mr. Barencourt drank half his and flung the rest into the fire. It blazed up in a brilliant red light, then died away as suddenly, leaving the fire dark as if water had been poured on it. But this beverage must have refreshed the high priest wonderfully, for suddenly rousing himself, he looked up at Mr. Barencourt and said, slapping his hand upon the chair arm, "Today has ended successfully, but the first thing I do on coming into office tomorrow is to bring that woman to trial." "Which woman?" said Mr. Barencourt, sitting on the opposite side of the fireplace. "That fool who nearly spoilt everything last night by having too long a tongue." The wine surely had had a heating effect. "Miss Pauleaf?" "Yes, the one I took rather a fancy to at the Severins and asked you to introduce me to," and he laughed cynically. "Oh," said Mr. Barrancourt easily, "you'll let that die down. Set a constant guard of 2 priests to watch the curtain. Such vigilance will satisfy the people. Besides, Crokerly is doing the work of the paneling, and none can do it like him. You can't afford to quarrel with him over the mischief-making propensities of a woman." "Do you mean to say you would look lightly on her conduct of last night?" "Of course, she did you no harm. It's herself she's harmed, as she'll find out as time goes on. It's always best to be a bit forbearing with women. They're given to flying off rather unexpectedly at times." "No excuse. No excuse at all. She did it from malicious intention and love of meddling." "What do you propose to do, then? Tear her tongue out?" "Imprison her for life." "Oh, Lord!" said Mr. Barrancourt, and he laughed. Then he laughed again, and again he said, "Oh, Lord!" The other frowned, and the light of anger glinted in his eye. "You seem to rather approve of her conduct," he said. "Certainly I have to thank you for your speech, though, candidly speaking, neither I, nor I believe anyone else, could make head or tail of it." He spoke in a genuinely puzzled voice. "And for various other things I have to thank you, but in the matter of dealing with this woman, I beg you will not interfere." "Yes," said Mr. Barrancourt in a low, clear voice, "I shall interfere. The serpent is like everything else. It can't afford to get too much talked about, or its reputation is gone. If you prosecute her, you make yourself and it the laughing stock of Lucifram." "I uphold its sacredness and sanctity." "Cant and tomfoolery. You say I made a speech last night you didn't understand, and I didn't take the pains to understand it myself. But if you persist in this, I'll make another before long which will appeal to everyone, and tread on no general corns at all, but that of the individual." "You are in a quarrelsome mood tonight." "Yes, I've been in the society of priests all day, and they weary me," the other laughed. "That's a hint to me. However, for the present you may have your way, but I tell you candidly, if there's any hubbub made, I bring her to trial." Then he went away, but walking along the silent streets, he said, "Barrancourt's as spoilt as a child. Cross him in the least thing, and he's inside out in no time. Yet in some whimsical, flimsical kind of way, he's been the best friend I've had, and helped me on considerably the present affairs. All the same, that girl shall suffer. The thing to do in this world is to teach people to keep their tongues still. It 3 parts the battle of life." And Mr. Barrancourt, left to himself, stood a long time looking into the rekindled fire, which tells so much to those who read it properly, and his face betokened more weariness and contempt than even in the past years, and the lines of his features were finer. "Revenge first, thanks a very doubtful second," he said at length, and then went off to the stables. All through the blackness of the night the black steeds galloped, and some mistook their dusky forms for passing clouds, and their wild eyes for distant stars, and the rhythm of their feet for the rumbling wind. That night, as Rosalie slept, the frog left its customary place on the washing stand and came close to her ear. And though all the room beyond was dark, the light round her head and pillow was very white and pure. All the things the frog whispered it would be unfair to say, for the frog was working for his own ends, as most of us do, and therefore colored things to its own liking. Rosalie woke in the morning and looked at the deceitful frog now sitting on the washing stand and said, "I've been dreaming that a tiny little angel came and sang to me and laughed. And though I can't remember one word of what it said, I know that everything was very pleasant, so that many a time I found that I was laughing too." End of chapter 28. Chapter 29 of Jewel Sowers by Edith Allonby. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christine Rottger. A confession. Time flew on till it was just 2 days before Christmas, or at least the festival which in Lucifram takes the place of Christmas in our world. On this particular afternoon, Rosalie dressed with the greatest possible care and looked 3 consecutive times sideways in the glass to see if her nose was any better disposed to turn downwards, but it wasn't. Still, it detracted nothing from the general effect, and, indeed, might be said to help, if only on the side of morality, to keep her from growing conceited. The frog, having come to that stage when one evidently regards oneself as quite perfect enough, felt no qualms as to its appearance, took not one doubtful glance into the glass. Rosalie, when she was ready, put her head through the door to tell Miss Crokerly she was going to pay a call. She did not say where. Miss Crokerly, busy with festival matters, simply nodded her head. It was just a little after 3. Rosalie left the house and walked on quickly till she came to Greensward Avenue. Coming here, her steps slackened, but she continued walking till she came in sight of Marble House. Here she came to a dead stand and looked blindly on the pavement. Her heart was beating so quickly that if passers-by had not been walking along so heavily, they must have stopped to inquire about it. But from a full stop she ran lightly and hurriedly up the steps and rang the bell. There was no escape now, for within 30 seconds it had opened. There stood Everard, just the same as ever, as silent, as polite, no more surprised. Rosalie took her courage in both hands. There was that hideous umbrella stand that a dowager duchess had once exclaimed was the most charming novelty she'd ever seen. "Is Mr. Barringcourt at home?" said she. He looked as if he had never seen her before, but after a moment's pause he said, "Yes, will you come this way?" and led her through the outer vestibule into the wide and gloomy hall. There he left her and went in the direction of the master's study, but soon returned. The afternoon had quite faded now, and as he conducted her along the western corridor he turned on the lights. Mr. Barringcourt received her almost silently. He made some remark about the weather. It was of little importance. He drew a chair for her. Rosalie sat down. "I came to see you," she began, clasping her hands tightly inside her muff. Because, said he in a most distant of voices, "you wished to see Mariana." "No, I'm afraid I was too selfish to think of Mariana. I was thinking only of myself." She did not notice the alteration in his expression, because she had not noticed the previous hardness of his voice. But she got a vague idea he was not particularly pleased to see her, yet was determined to go on. "It has sometimes struck me," she began hurriedly, "that it was very ill-mannered of me to run away from you. I escaped by a little door in the stable wall." A very curious silence followed this remark. Then Rosalie continued, "The country beyond was very beautiful. At least, I thought it was. It led me to a white house with a low veranda and a pretty garden. It took me a whole day to go, and the sun was setting when I got there. In the house I met a youth. At least, I thought he was young, but afterwards he told me he was nearly as old as you. But he seemed to grow very quickly in the time that I was staying there. He took me to his father. At first I thought he was very old, because his hair was white. I had just 1 day's holiday when I was there, and then I went to live in a little hut all alone, with a plantation in front of it. I sowed a basket of seeds in the ground that the governor, that is the name I knew him by, had given me. But first I had to dig in the soil, and I didn't like digging at all. I hated it. After that, everything went by the rule of contrary. The seeds never came up. They grew underneath and looked to me like very beautiful jewels. They took a great deal of digging out and freeing them from the soil. I took them to the governor, and he sent them somewhere. I think he said it was to the city, to be tested and valued, but every time they were sent back and marked as rubbish. I've never felt quite the same since. I used to feel young before, but ever since I felt as old as old. And I do nothing but pretend all day long in little and big things alike. I pretend least with you of anyone, and that night I ran away from you in the street. You remember it? I felt quite surprised, and in one way just a little happy. It made me feel just a little more alive. But after a while the governor said I had better come back again into the world. I didn't want to, because there was nowhere to go to, and I did not want to come back to this house again. I was tired of prisons. But when he told me to come back into the world, I was obedient, because I knew he was much wiser than anyone that I had ever met before. He was kind to me in some ways, although he never threw kindness away. So one morning I started on the return journey, and Brightcoat came along with me for company. When we were in the streets, I went along scarcely knowing what I was doing. I was so tired, and at last I sat down on a doorstep. It was Sir John Crokerly's, and when his sister came home she took me in, and I have lived there ever since. There's nothing else to tell you. Now you know all. You need trouble yourself to be agreeable to me no longer. After all, I owed it to you to tell you. You gave me a greater gift than I thought it possible anyone on earth could ever give me, and you no doubt put it down to science, but I put it down to God. And about my coming here, when I first did come to you, I came from the sacred place of the temple. I had given up wishing to be cured of being dumb, at least praying to be cured, because I thought God was not wishful to cure me. And I prayed to the serpent just to help me to live the right way, because I knew that that was the only thing God really cared about. And the serpent seemed quite to disappear. In its place came the presence of God. Only one little ball of light and gold was left out of all that giant frame and jeweled head. And I don't know quite how it was I came to you, any more than now I have gone to Miss Crokerly. With these words said, she got up and stood facing him, for he had not sat down during this monologue, but stood looking at her, a thing which, after first beginning, she seemed quite unconscious of. Her words had been simple, her sentences short and abrupt, and at times somewhat disconnected, but Rosalie's voice was so sweet that it seemed to run like a silver bell in and out the mazes of this experience. Now she held out her hand. I have detained you long enough. Perhaps you'll forgive the schoolgirl style, though I feel so old I can find no other. Come with me to the stable, said he, and show me the door. I don't believe there is one. You will be able to find it yourself. I had much rather you came with me. It is the only way in which I can credit your story. So together they went through the silent house and silent grounds and silent shrubbery. The red light shone full down the middle pathway to the stable door, but Brightcoat shed a softer brilliancy round about, if not so clearly and direct. But then there was no need for it as guide to day. The stables shone out with a certain curious light of their own, a dusky, shadowy brightness. At a certain touch, the unseen door slipped backward and revealed the shadowy twilight within. And as is customary with horses, they turned their graceful heads and looked with wild eyes on the newcomers, and one in the far corner neighed, but they seemed shadowy. All were shadowy. Eyes shone like carbuncles, the only distinctive feature, and there was nothing of warmth there. Everything was cold and chilly as a vault. But Brightcoat's light was useful here. It shone in direct rays onto that little unnoticed door that was built so unobtrusively in the wall. There, said Rosalie, and she touched his arm. I went through there. Strange, said he. I never saw that door before. How did you open it? With the key of my uncle's safe, but that has gone. I don't know what I did with it. I was in such a hurry to get through and close it after me. And the path led you to a low white house with a veranda? Yes, Let us return. It is cold here. You'll give your horses rheumatism if you keep them in so damp a place." "You are not acclimatized, but we will go. Strange, I never noticed that door. As for the others, I suppose if they did notice it, they imagined I had done so too." When they were back again in the house, which seemed cheerful after the intense cold without, Mr. Barrancourt said, "Will you have tea before you go?" "No, thank you. Our last tea together had not a very pleasant ending, though it began so charmingly. We're like most people, best friends when parted." "Then I may not see you again till festival night." "Do you still renew the invitation?" He laughed. "If I were not very contrary, you would make me angry. You harp so constantly upon an unreasoning subject." "Ah," she said suddenly, "let me see Mariana. Send for her." "Not tonight." "Yes, tonight. I will not keep her longer than a minute, just to see if she is just the same." "She has not altered, take my word for it." "You said if I came here I should see her." "You must have misunderstood me. I never said so." I don't believe you ever mean me to see Mariana again," she said. "Indeed? What makes you think so?" And he laughed again, not at all kindly. "Because you know quite well that I should do my very best to persuade her to come away with me." Rosalie bowed and swept away toward the door, and when she got there she said to Everard, quite loud enough for Mr. Barrancourt to hear, who still stood in the hall, "When next you see Mariana, please give her my love and tell her I asked to see her but was not successful." He bowed solemnly and let her pass, but took no further notice than if he had been made of stone. End of chapter 29. Chapter 30 of Jewel Sowers by Edith Allonby. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain, read by Christine Rottger. Festival. Now came Christmas night. On Lucifram, Christmas Day wasn't marred by any subsequent church-going. It was nothing better than a heathen feast. The serpent had nothing to do with it. On that day the children went simply wild and gave themselves incredible airs, demanded their best toys, gorged oranges and apples, made themselves ill with plum pudding, demanded their full share of turkey and got it, and looked with expectant eyes on the iced cake when it appeared, just as if they'd been starving all day, the little wretches. The grown-up world, unless it was going out to an evening party, yawned and ate its customary Christmas fare, and drank it, too. Then the old people played cards, and the young people sang, especially the young men with untrained voices, and the lovers behaved as if they really were in love with one another. Come and watch Rosalie. Now that day there had arrived 2 Christmas presents so beautiful that many an empress might have envied them. The first came early in the morning, before the postman, a curious and unusual thing. There's no doubt Santa Claus was on the warpath, for such a lovely ball and reception dress could only have been made in some magic fairyland. It was like shining silken crepe, all frosted over with tiny sparkling jewels, all in white. It shone like soft, pure snow in the sunlight, and fell in folds of simplest grace. It was so very simply, yet so very wonderfully made, that one wondered what it was that gave it such a beautiful effect. "Is it not too dead white to suit me?" said she to Brightcoat after going into raptures on its beauty. "See here, there is a little box below," said it. And Rosalie opened it and uttered the most real cry of delight in her life. "It's my stone, my first stone, that I love so, all set in gold and ready to wear. Oh, Brightcoat, Brightcoat, look!" And she sat down on the bed and hid her face in the pillows and cried from different emotions. At last she wiped away the tears and looked up, her eyes falling on the shining stone again. I love them all as if they were my children, and that's somehow the most, because it was the first, and I believe it loves me too. Look how beautiful a ray of light it sends towards me, and I never hope to see it again." Rosalie took it up and kissed it and shed tears upon it, but the light from it was never dimmed. One might have thought it was made tear-proof. "I need no other color. This is quite enough, and you, Bright Coat." "Yes, of course, there's me," said the other thoughtfully. This was the beginning of the day, but when the postman came, besides bringing letters and cards without end, some of the latter bearing halfpenny stamps after the style of circulars, he brought a parcel, also directed to Rosalie, in handwriting that the frog declared was superior to anything it had ever seen. It was opened in public, and inside was a pair of slippers as white as snow and worked in diamonds. And they were such a curious shape they looked as if they must really be antique, because they had little square toes and gold straps across. They reminded one of the daintiest garden clogs, so light were they, and when Rosalie put them on she wanted to dance right away. "They're made on the same pattern as the little wooden clog I have upstairs," cried she. "Look, Miss Crokerly, they dance of themselves." And in excess of spirits she pirouetted round the room and kissed both those elderly people from superabundance of excessively childish glee. Where they had come from she didn't know. She thought they had come from the same source as the first, although they came by post. So that evening she dressed for the real pleasure of the thing, and when it came to pinning the jewel into the bosom of her dress, her hands trembled, just because she loved it so. It shed just the same soft shades onto her dress as the light of the moon might shed onto the snow, a passing green and golden and palest blue that melted into white, and on her shoulder the ever-present frog, and a new light in her eyes, because the ice tears had rolled out of them. And underneath the shining jewel her heart beat quickly. She went with Sir John, Miss Crokerly having preceded them in Mr. Barrencourt's carriage some time ago. "Do you know," said she, "I thought at the last minute you'd change your mind and stay away." "Oh, no," he replied. "I always go when Barrencourt throws his house open. There are so many things that interest me there." "Yes, it's quite after the nature of a museum, is it not?" "Yes, unlabeled, so that it has an additional charm." They took their turn in the long line of carriages, and after a considerable time were enabled to alight. There was an awning from the parapet to the door, and the steps were also covered a deep red. Rosalie looked for Everard. He was not there. 2 powdered footmen instead. They were not inmates of the marble house. Neither were any of those who personally waited upon the guests that night. There was not a waiting maid anywhere about to compare with Mariana, and Rosalie could not have imagined her proud and delicate face amongst that throng. But how different did the wide hall look that night, brilliantly lit and with huge fires burning at either end, fires fit for festival and freezing weather, and no undue crowding of guests to do away with comfort and beauty and enjoyment. The wide doors to the southern wing, leading to the picture gallery and conservatory, were thrown open. So also were those to the west, containing the reception rooms. No empty echoing fireplaces now, but full of life and laughter and vivacity. A reception was held first. Dancing did not begin till 11, when a well-known princess was to lead with a gavotte. She was very proud of her instep. At 12 supper was to be served in the large subterranean hall, a place Rosalie had never been in, nor indeed anyone else. And after that dancing began again, and continued till 4, then carriages and home. On entering, Rosalie was presented with a program that explained all this. It was book-shaped, with a mother-of-pearl back, and in the center a perfect little garden clog with a broken string in gold, and underneath, Christmas 0039, that being the year as reckoned in Lucifram. "Oh, how charming!" cried one lady who had just received hers before Rosalie. "An old clog for luck. It is delightful." Flowers, the most gorgeous and tasteful, banked every available corner. Truly, the house had been completely altered from darkness into light. Mr. Barrancourt on these occasions made an excellent host. He had none of the clumsiness of the bachelor host, being for all the world as much at home as if he'd been married and had 10 children. Now it was a dancing night, and thanks to an excellent example, there was not one smoke-absorbed or card-absorbed or billiard-absorbed man present. For one night everybody made a delightful martyr of themselves, and secretly enjoyed the process. Rosalie's program did not fill so quickly, for there were many there who took her to have religious mania, and doubted they might have something to put up with. Moreover, there were very few persons there that she really knew. At last she was suddenly accosted by Mr. Barrancourt. "First and last dance, Rosalie," said he, and they looked at one another. Then, looking down at her program, he said, "What an empty list!" "It's quite right, thank you. I don't care about dancing. I'd rather watch other people and listen to the music. Find me some quiet old lady whom I may sit by, and who does not talk too much. It is all I ask of you." "There are not many present. They are all young and frivolous, or old and giddy. A much easier task would be to find you partners for every dance." "I should be dead tired before supper time. I can't talk to strangers, and I don't know every dance. And it takes rather a brave man to accost me. I perceive them mentally screwing themselves up to a pitch as they approach." "Under those circumstances it was very kind of you to come. Here comes the princess. I'll return later." The princess smiled so condescendingly all round that everyone was charmed with her. She had a light walk, as one who treads on eggs and fears to break them, and her admirers said she glided as the spirits do. As soon as she came, and of course she came rather late, the proceedings of the evening began. She danced the gavotte, and brought her own dancing master and fiddler to play, as she was accustomed to be played up to. When the real dancing began, there was one of the best bands in Lucifram in readiness, that all the evening more or less had been playing favorite airs, and another to relieve them when the occasion needed. Mr. Barrancourt sought and found Rosalie. "Should you not have given the first dance to the princess?" said she. "No, my step does not suit her, and she is sufficiently truthful to tell me of it." "I can scarcely believe your step is wrong." "No, she is easier to deal with than you. She goes greatly on credit. It's a royal failing. Come, let us begin. If this waltz is as it should be, it will be all too short." And no seventh heaven could have surpassed if equaled it. "How lovely," said she suddenly. "If one could die dancing." "It would mean company on a lonely road," said he, "and cheat death of some of its tragedy with well-matched partners." Did you send me those slippers that I'm wearing?" "What makes you think so?" "The little clog on the back of my program. It's the exact facsimile of one I used to wear." "I had a little story as near as possible to that of Ali Crimjo. For one morning there was found in the middle of my hall a little garden clog without owner or companion. It came there through barred doors and spring-barred doors, and none could make out how it came there, not even I. I never learnt it till the night when you came to say your lesson. I proved it when you wore these little satin-covered skates tonight." "You'll give it back to me?" "Oh, no, I'm keeping it for luck. That is a lovely stone you're wearing." "It's one I told you of, dug from the garden with a great big fork and spade, just as a man digs." "I believe I've seen it before in my father's house. No, indeed, unless your father was the governor I spoke of. He laughed. Then at last the dance was over. "I've found the lady you asked me for," said he. "Miss Crokerly is my guardian angel tonight. It is she who discovered her. Here is an excellent place where you may sit and see everything and hear the music to advantage too." And then he took her to a seat and introduced her to a lady sitting there. She was so charming a companion. Her silences were never awkward, and now and again she would give Rosalie information about certain people, all of a good-natured, if shrewd kind, that was the highest entertainment. At 12 punctually, the company descended to supper. The staircase down was of black marble, and spiral also, like the one above. It had none of the slippery treachery that characterized its sister staircase, though, and it seemed altogether of a much more reliable make. To a spectator, the gay colors of the ladies and their sparkling jewels looked like brilliant multicolored scales on a gigantic serpent, reared pillar-wise to support the vast chamber below. The subterranean banquet hall of Marble House was nothing better, nothing worse than a crypt. It had great and massive pillars of hardened, blackened marble, a fitting support for a fitting house. Its floors were tiled in marble, its walls of marble too, but whereas a crypt, if lit at all, is content with lamps of oil, or the feeble glimmer of electricity, this place was deluged with light. The most brilliant candelabra hung from the ceilings, sparkling in the 1,000 glintings of diamond glass. The tables were covered with finest snow-white cloths, and all the decorations were of silver, purest and brightest and most finely worked, and all the flowers were red. Here, screened from view, the band was playing gently. A soft and scented air of luxury arose, as if to show that crypts upon occasion have finer possibilities than dining rooms. The princess, led by Mr. Barencourt, descended first, and halfway down stopped to admire. "Which was the pirate, you or Mr. Todbrooke?" said she. "I'm sure you carted off the plan of a cathedral, and the material too." "That is an open secret," replied he, laughing. "But his was the theft, not mine. I simply inherited what he had left. But he had a gloomy taste. Now, were I building, I'd fix upon a little bungalow, a whitewashed place with a world-wide garden for the summer-time." The princess was not of that simple nature that enjoys simplicity, but she delighted in anything odd, as she considered it, because it made her laugh. "Do you really mean to say you are a philosopher enough to grow accustomed to things?" she asked. "Till I see a way of escape." "And you see none from here." The princess had not such keen eyes as Rosalie. She was not fond of studying faces, except for what animal beauty they might possess. "None," said he, "although 'tis said Todbrooke escaped by the back door." "Died," said she, and looked at him with a vague suspicion of horror in her eyes. She was of a superstitious nature. But he laughed. "You talk of death at a dance," said he. "One might almost think, princess, you were primitive and scorned the guarded terms of civilization." The conversation had taken a turn not to her fancy. He had thrown a shadow over the brilliantly lit supper-room. She shivered involuntarily and looked about her petulantly and said, "Are you quite sure this place isn't damp?" "Not at all. Not a rheumatic dampness, anyway. Spirits do not count. They are above it." Then their conversation ran into a lighter channel suited to the occasion, and the feast began right royally, when the plumed peacock was carried in to be admired in death, a lasting tribute to its vanity. The band played, and the people laughed and feasted and talked. In the whole of Lucifram that night could not have been found a gayer or more brilliant company. End of chapter 30. Chapter 31 of Jewel Sowers by Edith Allonby. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christine Rottger. Mysteries in Marble House. But there was one person who never came down to supper, at the right time anyway, and that was Rosalie. She had strolled off alone to the picture gallery, led to look again on that curious representation of the former master of Marble House. The silence as the last guest went down below made her heart beat a little faster. She listened to the last echoing laugh, and he seemed listening too. The slightly bending figure indeed betokened an attitude of close attention, almost the hidden smile of one who listening understands. The long line of pictures ran either side of her, each in itself a work of beauty. She remembered that day when Mariana had gone off to the East Wing from here. Tonight the East Wing was closed. All this great glare of artificial light never traversed there. A heavy crimson curtain hid the polished door that led to it. But Rosalie's spirit wandered off in that direction. A great curiosity with a deeper feeling underneath to give the strength it needed led her out into the central hall, led her gliding towards that gloomy fatal door. She drew the curtain back with one white hand, white as snow against this deeper shade, and turned the handle. The door opened. Blackness, dampness, and the smell of decay and mildew met her, like a blast of foul despair. She threw up her head, passed through, and the door slipped to behind her. And for one moment it seemed as if the parting kiss of freedom glowed on her forehead once again. And yet again the darkness was dispersed, for both the frog and the jewel and her own shining dress, that shone apparently without the aid of outer light, gave all the light it needed. And here within this gloomy place at last came life and beauty, and the soft tender light that lived in its own strength and was unborrowed. Number 13! How well Rosalie remembered it. Mariana's workroom, a worse place than many a prisoner's cell. Yet it had about it an air of indefinable grandeur, the place of no petty criminal or one sunk in moral disease. The rusty latch uplifted and disclosed the low-built room beyond, and the dim burner, the oaken chest, the damp, peeled walls, the shadowy corners, the tragedy of silence. But what of these? They served but as backgrounds to a picture, and fitting backgrounds. For there, beside the long, low table hid by the sheet, as white today as ever it had been 3 years ago, sat Mariana. But nothing there equaled the marble whiteness of her face. Her graceful figure bent forward, her hands were clasped on the table, and her lips was that curious smile of pain, quite frozen there as, wide open, her eyes stared at this hidden treasure on the table. Some spider, mistaking the silent figure for a thing inanimate, had weaved a web of finest threads from head to foot, covering her silken hair and rough-spun dress. But respecting the icy chill that hung about those cold, cut features and hands, it had left them free and bare. All about the cell fluttered the silent moths, settling and rising from the table, yet they were powerless to canker anything. The bitter iron of living sorrow had too hard a crust. The light that Rosalie brought with her lit up the room. She stood upon the threshold, gazing spellbound with horror on the central form. Could this be Mariana, this frozen statue, this figure nipped to the spirit with unavailing pain? Oh, never, never! For there this beautiful machine, working so fine a marvel of creation, had come upon a horrid pause, a fearful counterfeit of death, a fearful mockery of life. Then the spell broke. With outstretched arms she hurried forward. "Mariana!" No sound or movement came in reply. She placed her hand upon the stiffened shoulder. The cobweb broke. The spider saw and ran away. She threw her arms around the other's neck and kissed her stony cheek. No sound or movement in reply. Burning tears fell from her eyes. They had no power to melt that which had been congealed so long, frozen from ice to marble. Nothing availed, even when she fell upon her knees and pressed her warm lips 100 times upon the death-chilled fingers. Powerless and weak, oh God, for strength of some sort, to give life to the dying or the dead. What blasphemy, what heresy, what presumption, the ignorant tumult of a still untutored heart. Then she drew back and looked at Mariana, fighting down every emotion to make way for thought. Her eyes fired with indignant protest, and she said, "I'd rather be a murderer out and hanged for it. And to think of this night, when in this very house there is no sound of anything but gaiety and laughter, and people feasting. And here there sits a prisoner and worse, and one man conscious of it. Oh, Brightcoat, how can you think well of such as he? I cannot bear to look at him again." And then she stooped and took the slippers off she wore. "I wore them happily at first, but now they're all so tight they pinch my feet. I wonder what sweating or freezing system it was brought them into shape. And I so selfish as never to insist before on seeing whether she were free or no." The slippers off, she looked at them, then at the silent figure sitting there, and turned away half shivering. She placed the slippers upon the table on the sheet. The moths, descending, fluttered round them, yet did not touch, for, taught by instinct, they had learnt what could and what could not return to dust. Then, with one parting call of "Mariana," one loving kiss, one shivering glance around the dismal place, she went away, closing the door behind her into the outer passage. Curiosity bade her try some of those other low and numbered doors, but all were locked. This tragic wing was surely haunted. The air was condensed of sighs, an essence which hung heavy on the heart. But before opening that crystal door, all rusted iron and cobwebs from this inner side, Rosalie stood still to think. Then she pushed it open and emerged into the brilliant hall, still silent. From here she passed toward the staircase leading down to the supper room, where all the guests were now assembled. But to return to them. There was no lack of merriment throughout the length of tables, but as the supper progressed and people became accustomed to their surroundings, general comments were made upon a long and double-folded curtain of heavy material that hung from floor to ceiling at the lower end of the vast chamber beside the staircase. There was present at that supper a young girl just out that season, as giddy, as merry, and full of happy spirits as one unknown to care or saddened thoughts can ever be. And to close a spirited discussion with some as young and thoughtless as herself, just as the feast was ending, she left her place amidst a laughing silence and ran to the farther upper end of the table, where Mr. Barrencourt sat beside the princess. With the happy assurance of youth never rebuffed, she accosted him. "I come," said she, still laughing, "to plead on the side of our religion. They say that dismal curtain bears a resemblance, and a very striking one, to the crimson one within the temple. Will you not contradict them?" He looked across the room toward it. "One's black and the other's red," he said, and smiled. "Yes, but we were discussing what it might be beyond," and her face was demure, though her eyes were sparkling with merriment. "With what result?" said he. "We all grew curious. Princess, will you be curious too?" "Oh, instantly. What is beyond that curtain, Mr. Barrencourt? Tell us, or show us, pray." The silence of expectation had settled on the guests. Barrencourt leaned forward toward the table, playing with his half-filled glass of wine beside him, and when he spoke his voice was low, yet perfectly distinct. "You know," said he, "it was a foible of Mr. Todbrooke's to collect as many heathen gods and false ones as lay in his power. This house was built on a system, I might say systems, of idolatry, its furniture collected from disused temples sought for all over the face of Lucifram. Behind that curtain stands a god, more hideous than any I have ever seen, and I've seen plenty in my time, as maybe most of you have done. The curtain came along with it from the temple where it stood, and in a state of wonderful preservation, over 1,000 years in age." "What is beyond?" was the general question throughout the chamber. "A death's head of unusual size, worshipped and feared of all in the parts from where it came." "Let us see it." A general murmur of anticipation ran round the room. "These poor heathens," said one lady, and her tone was patronizing. "How ignorant they must have been." "And are still in some parts, madam," said he. "We do our best with the missionaries," she replied. "Let us see it, please." This was the voice of the charming youthful pioneer from the back. "It's a death head," said he, and he smiled very kindly as he spoke. "They are not beautiful." "But I've enjoyed myself so much all evening, Mr. Barencourt, that I could not bear to be disappointed now. Besides, the princess has commanded you. Please show us the head." "It has never to be seen but in complete darkness. It's a clause of the will. It was the condition on which he bought it, I believe, from a few crazy priests who had no congregation. But they all wished to see it, light or no light. It was a little novelty to wind up supper and take the place of toast. So suddenly the light switched out and left the place in total darkness. Those who were on terms familiar enough clasped one another's hands. They found the situation not unpleasant. And then upon the instant the black curtain swung backwards and revealed a space beyond, from which gleamed out in ashen whiteness and dusky hollows from the blackness the skeleton head of Death. It was the head of some great giant of unusual size, with the yellow teeth discolored, but all present. All looked at it with gloomy interest, and some began to wish, as darkness continued, they'd been less eager to examine it. But suddenly and swiftly in the silence, two gleaming balls of light glared red from the empty sockets, to turn their gaze at every individual around the room, and with a gleam most sinister. This was truly horrible, a room so black and dark that none could see each other, the bleached skull and skeleton of a superhuman head, and above all the terrible gleaming eyes, the only flash of light in the whole room that had the power of penetrating, and gave each the impression the evil eye was fixed on him alone. A spell of silence had fallen. No woman cried. The laughter of 10 minutes since had died. Even the very sound of breathing was now quite hushed. This was the deadened, powerless load of nightmare. Suddenly a light appeared on the spiral staircase, the gleam of snowy whiteness, the soft glow of an undying lamp, and the pure colors of a splendid moonshine. And above all a face and figure of most simple beauty, eyes pure and starlit in contrast to the red gleam, and a crown of mermaid flaxen hair, an expression sweet and thoughtful. It was a wonderful and sweet relief to the ghastly spectacle below. And on a sudden the full lights flashed on again, and a sigh of relief burst from every heart and many lips. The black curtain had fallen. Rosalie alone remained of the weird scene, descending the spiral staircase. A little thing will often bring about reaction, and from being shunned by many, she from this opportune arrival gained a fair share of popularity. "Where have you been?" dozen voices cried, glad to make sound again. "Trying to find a partner," cried she, and laughed, and others laughed as well. The search had been so long and unsuccessful. "Supper is finished." There was no lack of those to offer attention now, and along with this came the general bustle of those leaving the supper table. But by the side of Mr. Barencourt stood the girl who, from a mixture of youthful spirits and curiosity, had asked the first the curtain might be moved. "I am glad I had finished my supper," said she, with an attempt at laughing still. "I'm sure I could never eat anything in here again." "It is fortunate refreshments are served upstairs," he answered. "You would not let so small a thing interfere with your evening's pleasure." Reassured somewhat by his tone, she said, "After all, it was only an idol, was it?" "That's all." "They must be very brave folk to worship it, eh?" Yes, the serpent is much less gruesome, isn't it? He laughed. Well, an empty skull often looks much worse than it is. But, said she, it wasn't empty. I never saw such eyes. Never, never. You haven't seen the serpent yet. No, but Mother did, and she said nothing about its eyes. She said it was plain to be seen we worshipped the true God. His scales were such a lovely gold. I am going to ask Miss Crockerly to introduce me to her friend. I'm sure if she had not come, then I should have fainted right away. And I always laughed at Blanche for fainting. She used to do it so conveniently. So saying, she slipped away, and to the upper regions where, so far as she knew, there was nothing gruesome hidden away. And soon the episode of the death's head was forgotten, and the evening's enjoyment began again with even greater zest. Rosalie's program filled, but she never danced. Who could when wearing only stockings? But she did not go home, but waited for that final dance, and no one noticed her slipperless feet. End of chapter 31. Chapter 32 of Jewel Sowers by Edith Allonby. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christine Rottger. Diplomacy. I have not the slightest inclination to dance, Mr. Barrancourt. I spent one of the most delightfully lazy evenings I have ever spent in my life. I envy you. I've been going through a species of treadmill. I've danced with every schoolgirl in the room, myself included. You began the evening badly, you know. He sat down beside her. Where were you all the supper time? He asked. Rosalie looked at him. She detected the old, tired, wearily contemptuous expression on his face. She herself was far from tired. Her eyes were bright. Her cheeks had flushed a pretty pink. She had been under no unwilling exertion to please anyone. I stayed upstairs to see how long I'd be forgotten, and when no one remembered me and I grew hungry, I came down. You should have acted the part of the jealous fairy godmother and blasted us all. Well, though I be a schoolgirl, yet I've none of the attractions of youth, and so I've learnt toleration. It's hardly fair to keep repeating what I once said at random. Was it at random? I set a whole night apart to weep about it. You had nothing better to do then? The most miserable of all states, you must acknowledge, and through no fault of my own. Whose, then? Yours. You have much to be answerable for, Mr. Barrancourt. He laughed. I have expiated most of my offenses tonight. I have danced the polka. With Miss Severin, I saw you. Let us go into some quieter room. This dancing wearies me. I never was fond of it. Rosalie's trailing dress hid her feet, and they passed into the picture gallery. It was deserted. She sat down under the picture of Geoffrey Todbrook. One day Mariana brought me here and showed me this picture. I forget what was said, but somewhere in our conversation she laughed. She said laughing always produced a pain at her heart. Mariana laughed? You utterly astonish me. His face betrayed no signs of conviction of cruelty, certainly. Yes, said Rosalie, it is astonishing, truly. Had I lived here as long as she, laughing would have been utterly beyond me. It is a good thing you escaped, then. You don't grudge me my freedom? I grudge no man anything if he wins it, or a woman either, and far from grudging you your freedom, I'm glad you won it. You were glad then when I ran away? Well, no, not at the time. I do not know that I ever became thoroughly reconciled to you till you came to see me the other night. Here a pause followed, broken only by distant strains of music. You have another dance on New Year's Eve, Mr. Barrancourt. Yes, will you come? It is the one night in the whole year worth dancing on. I would come gladly, but I can find no dress to my liking. You have a week before you. She clasped her hands round her knee, shook her head, and looked at him. I won't come unless I can wear exactly what I want. And what is that? The dress that Mariana was making long ago, but I expect she's finished it, and the moths have eaten it away. But all the same, I won't come unless I have it. It is the one thing on earth I've set my heart upon." Mr. Barrancourt looked at her. The pretty air of reasonless determination suited her. "It's impossible," said he. "The moths have eaten it away, then?" And without pretense or acting, 2 big tears rose in her eyes and fell, one for sorrow at his hardness, one for the memory of Mariana in the cell. But 2 tears upon occasion can be very fascinating. "You never did reason, did you, Rosalie?" said he. "Yes, it's the one thing I've done all my life. But the simpler you are in this world, the more you're derided. Let me see Mariana and ask her about the dress." "Oh, hang Mariana." "Are you speaking broadly?" "What do you mean?" "You should never use abusive language towards the individual. I learnt that long ago. If you want to be profane, you should generalize." "Whose lax teaching was that?" "I learnt it from the governor, the gentleman whom I met when I ran away from you. But he wasn't lax, I'm sure. Perhaps I misunderstood him." "I wouldn't put it beyond you, but give me a form of forcible language that would fit with his exposition." "Well, the only one that presents itself at all to me is 'damn it.' You see, 'it' means nothing in particular, is quite impersonal, and therefore no one is any the worse for it, yourself included." "You're an advocate of that particular form?" said he. "I'd allow it to you upon occasion, but not to myself." "Indeed, why?" "Because if I were a perfect woman, I'd never have any inclination to go further than the d." "You're striving after the perfect woman?" "Yes," sighed Rosalie, "but she's very delusive. It's so easy to overstep the bounds and become saintly." He laughed. "I don't think you'll ever be that." "But why?" "The strain would be too great. You'd best remain as you are. I believe the dance is ending." And never a word settled about my dress." "Are you so much in earnest about it?" "Indeed, yes. I went through all the pains and penalties of trying it on, stood 3 weary hours as a model, and it was so beautiful my heart longed for it then, and has done so ever since." "It's nothing but imagination. You must look for something else." They rose together, and suddenly she put her hand upon his arm, and said in just such a voice as a mermaid might, half laughing, half plaintively, "I won't come to dance the new year in. I've nothing fit to come in. And as for the slippers that you sent me, you can search for them just where you like. I don't want them, and I won't wear them. I only want the dress." And she showed him her foot in its silk stocking without slipper or other covering. "Where are your slippers?" said he. "I've hidden them, and you may find them." And suddenly he looked at her quite sternly, and he said, "You've been to see Mariana." Rosalie returned the glance as meekly as became the situation. "The doors were all unlocked. Besides, you should have found me a partner for the supper time. I resented it." "And what do you think of Mariana?" "I think that you and I are inexpressibly different in our ideas of things." "Indeed, it is because of you she's placed where she is." "And because of me you ought to place her where she isn't." "I am not disposed to laugh. Your constant prying is objectionable." "I pay dearly for it. Hard words and cold glances from everyone, yourself included." "Not too high a price, it seems." "Dear me, no. I trust to the luck that saved Red Chin's wife. I'm not in the least bit inclined to cry tonight, Mr. Barrancourt. I feel happy enough to dance without slippers on." And she stooped and kissed the precious stone she wore. He looked at it and then at her. "Give that stone to me," he said suddenly. Her cheeks paled as quickly. "I love it too well to ever think of parting with it," she answered. "The price of Mariana's freedom." "No," and her voice was a mixture of a gasp and weakness. "And yet you love Mariana. How you do misjudge the word. You don't know what love is." "Neither do you." "I make no professions." "I have no right to give away this stone. It was given to me." "Keep it then. I simply asked for it to prove your inherent selfishness." "You could have proved it by a much simpler test. It is one of the dragon's heads, impossible to conquer. Every now and then I give it a sleeping potion and get some rest. It's very efficacious, I can tell you." She turned and went away, and they did not see each other again that night, or rather morning. End of chapter 32. Chapter 33 of Jewel Sowers by Edith Allonby. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christine Rottger. The Worth of a Jewel. The next morning, rather earlier than usual, Mr. Barrancourt called to see Miss Crockerly. He saw her alone, but as he was crossing the hall on going away, he was stopped by hearing Rosalie's voice from the staircase, and by seeing her coming toward him. "I have been waiting for you," said she, raising her finger as if in warning, as she came nearer and speaking very softly. "The dragon is sleeping, completely under the influence of a powerful drug. In the interim, I've brought you this, the thing you asked for last night." And she held toward him a tiny jewel case. He took it slowly, looking at her and then at it. Then the contents dawned upon him, and he looked at her again and laughed, though his eyes had a piercing keenness in them that took away the effect of the laughter. Then her manner changed, and she too laughed. She raised her lips to his ear and whispered, "I drugged the dragon with reason. Think what you will," and still laughing, would have moved away. Now it just chanced, for those who find no excuse for what followed, that there hung just above them a bunch of mistletoe. Miss Crockerly was a great advocate of Christmas parties for children, had had 3 such since December began, and holly and other Christmas decorations were much in evidence, but neither person concerned was at the moment cognizant of this fact. One was looking down, and one was looking up, but not at the ceiling. But all the same, in opposition to the laws of etiquette, yet quite in accordance with those of nature, Mr. Barrancourt suddenly stooped and took her hands and kissed her. It wasn't a bit like the ordinary kiss a man would give a woman. It fell as softly on her lips as a breath of snow, nothing of fire, so that she laughed again and shook her hands free, saying, "Thank you," ran away again. After that, Mr. Barrancourt went away looking as thoughtful and preoccupied as if he had never been frivolous in his life. He went home and passed at once to his own private laboratory and study. He took with him the tiny jewel case, and going up to one of the big windows facing the front of the house, took out the stone and looked at it. He looked at it so long that a bystander would have grown impatient. Then he went to the other side of the room and opened what seemed to be a cupboard, but was really a set of shutters opening upon a window looking on the garden at the back. The light from this window showed the jewel differently. Before it had been softest green and pink. Now a constant red ray gleamed from the center. He noted it and turned it many ways. The light still remained. No passing brilliancy or change of color. Then he went into the inner room and noted the different blendings and the texture by placing it beneath a glass, there to examine it minutely. Finally, he poured out from the old flagon, worked and chased in a substance like polished silver, a liquid that flamed up in the crucible like white-flamed fire, intense and beautiful. and into this he threw a stone that matched in some respects the one he carried in his hand. Under this great strength of heat it disappeared. No tiny fragment of luster or of substance now remained. And quite remorseless to its fate, he next flung in the stone that Rosalie had given him, and bent forward eagerly to notice the effect. No change! A glimmer blend of color on the surface of the flame. Then, with his fingers, as if the leaping tongues had been but water, he took the jewel out and dashed the sprays of fire away like drops of water. A smile, incredulous and all surprised, at first played on his lips and in his eyes as he looked at the jewel. Then, after some deep thought, he started as one from a dream, the light of sudden understanding in his eyes. He placed the stone once more within its case and put it in an inner pocket, then left the room and locked the door again. Leaving the wing, he went out into the central hall and passed across it to the eastern side, with its brilliant door and exterior brightness, all so false to the sordid truth behind. But there he paused and called across the high, empty, echoing space, "Everard, what is Mariana's number? I forget." 13. The answer was simple and distinct. "That's a lucky number, isn't it?" "I believe it's a significant one. Unlucky, some say." "We go by the rule of contrary. I think myself it must be lucky." And he laughed and flung open the great doors and passed inside. They swung to after him. Then, at the door he sought for, he stopped, and with the same quick movement threw it open. Inside the miserable cell, the scanty furniture, the covered table, the cobwebs, the thick dust, the cloud of hovering moss, the stiff and rigid figure, but to his eyes on entering, not the central figure of attraction. For there upon the table, standing daintily upon the covered cloth, he saw the little satin clogs, with their golden strings and skate-like edges, that turned up daintily, bearing an almost laughable resemblance to someone's pretty nose. For in the same way that many persons' clothes on wearing them become a part of them, and look like them, so these, scarce worn, became and looked a part of Rosalie. And in the midst of all this mildew and decay and icy lifelessness, they stood a thing of life, an open protest against everything surrounding them. Without looking toward Mariana, he went and took them in his hand. They were not soiled. They had only danced one short, delightful dance, and stood demurely side by side, longing to start again. The moss had never touched them. They were invulnerable. Then, placing them once more upon the sheet, he leaned his hand upon the table and looked at Mariana. Neither pity, distress, cruelty, nor any other emotion played on his face. He stood and looked at her, as deep in thought as if his mind was occupied with pages of a book, a long, long time. Then, throwing back the covering from the table, he revealed the thick piles of satin that she had worked at in the 3 years passing long since. So this was the dress that Rosalie coveted. Well, it was worth asking for, or would be when finished. For the first time on Lucifram, and here in one of its most dismal cells, a smile free from artifice, from cynicism, from pride, from cruelty or contempt ran on his lips and centered in his eyes. But the machine, and how to set it working? Only one way. He crossed to Mariana, laid one hand upon her head, the other in her hands, and stooping, kissed her lips. Then very silently, as some passing from life to death have done, she, with a sigh that trembled gently into every limb, swayed back to life. And on the second breath that stirred her bosom, looked up, and her eyes came to the face of Mr. Barrancourt. "You've slept long enough," said he. "You can't complain now of being overworked. A long spell of rest, and now comes a short one of work. Are you ready for it?" "Yes." She rose from the chair, no stiffness, the old slow easy motion born of coldness, itself born, who could tell of what? 6 days to finish this, and alone. Can you accomplish it? For whom? Rosalie. Has she asked for it? Yes. She stretched out her arms, then drew them in. It is well, because I fitted it for her, having no other model. You are to make it especially beautiful. It is not necessary to tell me so. And jewels? Everard will bring them to you. Now she raised her eyebrows slightly and looked at him, and a faint smile came to her lips. Is Rosalie then so strong to bear so heavy a burden of sorrows as this house affords? Search all you can from the dust hidden in this room, and he will bring the rest. Did Rosalie appear to you so weak? I loved her on that account, I think. Part of a cause that changes weakness into strength. You feel yourself strong, Mariana? Oh, no, but cold, the strength of ice, not iron. Rosalie has suffered from your complaint, I think, but she's cured. Her eyes rested on his. There was a thoughtful expression in them, and she said, Cured? Then the ice was frozen less deeply. Or maybe the fire was stronger. There's something in that, you know. Yes, said she, then suddenly, these moths are a great hindrance. I have no time to spend in sighs if I must work hard and finish in 6 days. Then I'll remove them for 6 days. After that they'll come back again, but you'll have finished. Yes, for Rosalie. And when to wear it? New Year's Eve. Thank you. Now you had better leave me. What of these slippers? Sew them with jewels. And make her tired feet? Is it some practice of cruelty? No, a whim of mine, to show honor to an escaped prisoner. I must wake. 6 days to make a dress, and it is rumored that one of the planets was made in that time. I must hasten. So then he left her, and she worked alone, and hour by hour some fresh seam in the design became completed. And on the 3rd day Everard came. He carried a large sack, and it was full of jewels of every known description, small and large. Standing there, he said suddenly, Can I help you with these, sorting or stringing? But surely it's against the rules. It is advisable to break them in emergency, and I doubt if this be not finished some great calamity will arise. The master is away. The work is out of all proportion to the time. For his sake, for yours, and for hers, I wish to help you for this day at least. So Mariana gave way, and one little flame of heat passed over the icy barrier almost unconsciously. The cell, being less lonely now, lost its ghastliness. Thus the time passed away until completion, the last day of the old year, the eve of the new. And on that afternoon at 4 o'clock, Mariana heaved a sigh of apparent contentment, for all was now in readiness, and Everard, having done his full share in the arrangement of jewels, and whatever else was needed, returned to the door in order to welcome Mr. Barincourt, who had just then returned. End of chapter 33. Chapter 34 of Jewel Sowers by Edith Allonby. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Christine Rottger. A gift, a friend, a foe, a beau, a journey to go. To return again for a brief interval to that day following Christmas Day. Mr. Barincourt, when he had left Mariana, went to see the great high priest, and afterwards attended with many others the service of dedication of the curtain. Miss Crokerly was there, but not Rosalie. Afterwards Mr. Barincourt said to the new high priest, when left alone together and the guests departed, "Why didn't you invite Miss Pauleaf?" "I have told you why. I am only waiting for a sufficiently good opportunity to bring forward the trial." Mr. Barincourt's lips set. You make a great stir about nothing, said he. I don't forget the awkward time at which he spoke. And when do you propose to send out the summons? On New Year's Day, a public trial in an ecclesiastical court. And you as judge? Oh, no, there is golden priest Ferdinand. I take no further steps in the matter publicly. And the punishment? Lifetime imprisonment. Mr. Barencourt looked at him and laughed. You laugh? After all, it is worth nothing better. People must be taught a proper respect for established religion. In childhood, yes. I doubt when they get older it's too late. And so you contemplate lifetime imprisonment. Could you suggest anything better? Well, there's escape. What do you say to that? Futile. Absolutely futile. The devil has helped her once. He may do so again. The devil? Who or what is that? They were ignorant of such a person on Lucifram. Ah, I had forgotten. He was never fashionable here. The devil is a libel on virtue, the exact imitator of God. And she is on familiar terms with this atrocity? I owe a general pardon. I was confounding him with a superior being, an error commoner than one thinks of. You speak in riddles, said the great high priest, and his tone was irritable. I mean to say God helped her to escape twice before, nay, 3 times. You are brave, to say nothing more of it, to put another spoke in the wheel. By God, do I understand you to mean the serpent? As you will. To my certain knowledge, she has kissed the serpent. The sensation must have been a new one, almost a dangerous one, after ages spent hearing the dull praise of men coming from lips all stereotyped. One soft kiss would have its value. The great high priest looked at him sternly, as became his office. The serpent is above such petty considerations, said he. You speak with too much levity of sacred things. A fault of my education, forgive me for it. And the summons is to be issued on New Year's Day? Or on the eve? I understand you. God and his counterfeit will help or hinder you. Good night. Next morning, walking in the park, he came on Rosalie walking with the frog. Quite unconscious of the impending trial, she stopped on meeting him. Good morning, said she. You look very thoughtful. Yes, I am thinking of taking a very unusual step. What, pray? Paying a visit to my mother. And he looked at her. That means your father, too, does it not? No, he answered, still looking at her in the same thoughtful, absent way. I frequently visit him. At present they are separated. Now it was her turn to be thoughtful. That's very sad, isn't it? Sadder than you think of. But for the irony of fate, they would be quite inseparable. And is it an unusual thing for you to visit her? Yes, I do not care to burden her with my presence unless there is some reason in it. That sounds unnatural. Does she love you? As much as I love her. That conveys nothing to my mind. Your powers of love are very enigmatical. They're simple enough on a worthy object. And is she very worthy? He made no answer, but said presently, with sudden decision, Mariana has begun upon the dress. It will be finished on New Year's Eve. And I to wear it? Yes. I went to see her. You guessed at it. But she seemed more dead than living. A little extra sleep. She said she needed it. What of the jewel that I lent you? It is very safe. I have a request to make to you. What is it? I wish to beg the jewel for my mother. What is she like? He smiled. Words cannot describe her. To my eyes, the perfection of beauty and loveliness, as innocent and simple and free from care or evil as the light. You don't resemble her, do you? Asked Rosalie, unconscious of the bitterness of her remark. He laughed, perceiving it. You may rest safely assured there. I know no one who resembles her. Is she kind? the essence of it. Then what of Mariana and such as she? His brow clouded. You ask questions I am not disposed to answer. Ah, but I'm thinking of my jewel. I love it so. Your mother would not value it a 10th part as much as I. Nay, before today it, and others like it, have been reckoned rubbish. She might think so too. Give me leave to take it to her, and await her verdict. If she underrates it, I'll bring it back to you. I'm afraid I must give the dragon so strong a dose there'll be no life left in it. If it is what you told me, the more honor remains to you in killing it with such a potion. And Rosalie laughed, but her eyes were wonderfully serious, and she said simply, I'll give it to you, Mr. Baroncourt, because it seems to me to love one's mother is the greatest and the simplest thing in the duty towards one's neighbor, if that mother is as she should be. And it is more than pleasant to me to know that somewhere in the wide universe there is someone who has broken through the natural hardness of your heart and called forth a respect and love of which I never thought you capable. The remaining days till New Year's Eve passed quickly. The weather was gloriously fine, the sunsets unequaled. Early in the evening Mariana arrived and brought with her a large box containing the dress and other things. She came in a carriage drawn by chestnut horses, not occupants of the stables at Marble House. Rosalie came out into the hall to meet her and kissed her with affection, which Mariana in her colder way returned. Together they went upstairs, Rosalie suddenly finding herself very short of words to express her delight at meeting this old friend. And it was Mariana who dressed her completely, from the arranging of her hair to the tying on of her clog-shaped satin-jeweled slippers. And oh, what a dress! With designs of lovers' knots worked in delicately tinted jewels all over its shining surface, and a train that hung from the shoulders in showers of priceless lace. It was studded with jewels in the bodice, and on her hair was placed a tiara that stood high and had the same design worked in diamonds. Clasps of gold and jewels were on her arms, and round her neck one fine chain of gold, no other ornament. I'm afraid after all, Mariana, said she at length, your great ambition has not come to pass. What thing was that? You wished it for a wedding dress. I am content to see it as it is, and you so beautiful. And when tonight is over, you will want it back? But Mariana smiled half dreamily. Tonight is not yet over, and you will never wish to part with such a robe. You begged it from the master, and you'll keep it. I know none other who would care to bear so great a load, though in its beauty all forget to think of that. I do not find it very heavy. It is well. Suddenly Rosalie laughed. I say, Mariana, said she, suppose when I come to Marble House it should shine red all round about me. They'd take me for a veritable scarlet woman. I have misgivings. I remember once before. But Mariana shook her head. I heard from the master you had gained strength from weakness, and I heard from Everard you had jewels of your own that you have worn to counteract the fatal charm of these. Not of my own, Mariana, they were of God. Ah, God, I had forgotten him. The dream has passed so long ago. God is no dream, but a living reality, Mariana. I was once bitten by a snake, and here they call the serpent God. I love not such an image, but live in the never-ending twilight. I think it is the shadowed light the idol throws, placing itself betwixt the world and God. And suddenly Rosalie took her hands in hers, and drew her to her with a gentle force, and kissed her lips and forehead, saying, But soon the idol will vanish out of sight, and the true light come. You needn't live in the twilight, Mariana, any more than I. You only need to trust the glorious spirit working behind the leaden cloud and struggle silently toward the healing light. And someday, even though the waiting time be long, the icy burden will be rolled away, and you all warm and bright again to love and honor God with strength unfettered. And then Brightcoat said, I should like to go with Mariana back to Marble House. Do you care for such a companion? Asked Rosalie of Mariana. But the frog jumped across and settled on her shoulder. You need me no more now, Rosalie. I have done what work I could for you. But now to Mariana. She may need me as once you did. And though her heart is cold today, the new year dawns, and with it in the distance I see a fairer prospect and a warmer light breaking upon the horizon of heaven. And so with this new companion Mariana went away back to Marble House, into that gloomy dwelling. Though now all brilliantly lit, the frog entered unafraid, and none thought to harm it, for the charm had worked, or perhaps was working. End of chapter 34. Chapter 35 of Jewel Sowers by Edith Allonby. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The sun rises on the year. A brilliant house again, a brilliant crowd, the eve of the new year, the deathbed of the old. Just 3 hours more to wait. But as Rosalie drove along, it was as if depression and the highest spirits fought one another for the mastery. The effects of wearing fine clothing, said she, and laughed and sighed in a breath. There is magic in these jewels, I feel certain. Oh, if I could but wear again my old precious moonstone talisman against all heaviness, instead of all this finery, that does its best to cramp my spirits and half succeeds. On entering, she was almost immediately joined by Mr. Barrancourt. Never had he looked to Rosalie as tonight, never perhaps she to him. With a scrutiny which had become habitual, they eyed each other, and at last Rosalie said, Do you not think I was right in being covetous of such a lovely gown? And the jewels? Oh, they were an extra thrown in. I'd much rather have been without them. You should be kind, not lavish, Mr. Barrancourt. After an hour's wearing, they begin to assert their individuality and weight. And at first you felt them light? Being alive to their beauty, I was dead to their encumbrance. And then again, this time seriously, she said, But in truth, I must acknowledge, perhaps, their weight cannot be very great, for I have the greatest wish to dance through every dance, and look to you to find me partners. I'm not really altered because I stole behind the temple curtain. For one night it might be forgotten. The first dance is with me, and the last one. Oh, no! I am in a mood of ingratitude tonight. I cannot, for the favor of this dress and all its valuable accessories, even say thank you. Find me a partner for the dance that's just beginning. No one has come near me since I came. The first dance is with me. Indeed, no. I'm entering on a life of self-denial. As soon as I want to do a thing, I shall cross myself and do the opposite. What chance shall I stand of heaven, do you think, at that rate? You'll never get there. Be guided by me and be less contrary. It goes very much against the grain for me to dance with you. Must I be consistent, or must I be contrary? Become impersonal and leave the decision with me. You are too selfish to be altogether trusted. I, selfish? Yes, I want to dance, and here you keep me talking. I want to study men and form comparisons. You can't in a place like this. On these occasions, they're all more or less alike. And on all others, the similarity of humanity is nerve-destroying. A very pleasant state of things. None but a fool would wish it otherwise. But if you wish to dance, you shall have partners in sufficiency. I'll say you're quite harmless tonight. Say no such thing. Mariana tells me she was once bitten by a snake, and so was I. Since then I've had the greatest inclination to bite everyone who comes near me. She took it badly. I, by God's help, was enabled to take it well." "What particular snake was it that bit you?" "I think it must have been the god of Lucifram." Then he left her and went away, and through the evening Rosalie danced, seemingly happy, on to that hour when the old year and the new meet and part again. Then she sought Mr. Barrancourt and found him not amongst his guests, but in that now deserted drawing-room where once Mariana had played for her. He was looking out onto the gas-lit streets, and the window being opened, the cold night air blew into the room. The lights in it were shining fully, yet the city without was plainly visible. "You have left the crowd?" said she. "Yes," he answered. "They can amuse themselves. You look tired." She laughed, an apology for deeper feeling, and looked at him with eyes whose tiredness was lost in a certain appeal and pathetic beauty that characterized them long since in the days of silence. "I think I overrated my powers of endurance. I should be very pleased to give the last dance to you. I left it empty." But he shook his head. "I have not danced all evening. I do not wish to make myself conspicuous now." "We could sit it out." "We might, but I am contrary." Then Rosalie went up to him and put her hand very gently in his arm, and almost whispered, "I have a feeling of insecurity that grows with almost every hour. It may be childish, but I never professed to be much different from a child. When I stay with you, it leaves me more or less, and always has done from the very first I met you. And now Brightcoat has left me, and I feel quite alone, a thing hardly enviable in any sphere, and I've gone through the evening as best I could, and tried to get the better of my weakness." And then she laughed and drew her hand away and said, "If such confessions are unusual, you only have this dress to thank for it. The jewels have magnetic power and draw me to the owner." At this he turned round from the window and looked at her, and a very curious smile curved on his lips. "That's your solution, is it?" he said, and scratched his head thoughtfully with one finger. Then he added, "My mother said I was to thank you for the stone you sent her." "Was she well?" "Yes. At the first stroke after midnight I go again to her. These guests will then have all departed." "I too." "You say that sadly." "The magnetism of the stone I sent her draws me to your mother." Just then Everard entered the room carrying in his hand a large sealed envelope addressed to Rosalie. At the back it was sealed with the image of the serpent. "You, Everard?" said Mr. Barrancourt with some surprise. I heard the doorbell ring and knew it was no ordinary guest of the evening. She took and opened it, a summons to appear before the high priest's court, and on the morrow morning, this first day of the new year. She read through it half mystified, the truth with some difficulty dawning upon her. Then on a sudden she handed it to Mr. Barrancourt, her face as white as the background of her dress, and he in his turn read it. Then he turned to Everard and said, "A priest who, with his companion, waits outside. I did not let them in." Master and man looked at one another, the same grim smile half visible upon each face. Then Mr. Barrancourt took out his watch and looked at it. "It wants still 20 minutes till the dance is ended. It is barely 20 minutes after 12. Are they impatient of delay?" "I did not ask them." "We'll go upon the supposition that they're patient." Then turning to Rosalie, he continued, "There was a time you told me that you scorned to run away, and never had done. Afterwards, upon much less occasion, you trusted to the fleetness of your feet. And now, are you prepared to meet the enemy?" "Indeed, no. Or perhaps I cannot tell. If you stood for counsel on my behalf, I think I might enjoy it. For myself, I could never get much farther than the truth." "A marvelous short journey with a sudden ending, but little reckoned upon Lucifram. What think you of lifetime imprisonment, Rosalie? Ah, it is that frightens me. I never liked the thought of prison. Must I really go? What plan of escape is there? Her brow knitted thoughtfully, then suddenly clearing, she said, Take me away with you. Take me to your mother? And she looked so very beautiful, with something so imperious in her manner, yet so sweet, that little wonder if the master consented. It's a long journey, and a very final one, and moreover, my horses are black. I'll trust to the rule of contrary where you're concerned, and trust you too. Take me where you will. I have sufficient power given me of my own to guard against vital evil. You trust me to a certain point, no farther, she laughed. I trust you altogether, but wish to show it is not quite from weakness I wish to come with you. Then we'll go. My mother is hospitable, and so are others round about her. Some are better known to you, no doubt, than she. A stranger is a rarity among them. You will be welcomed. Alas, but who can travel in a dress like this at midnight in the depth of winter? It is so conspicuous. No dress could be so suitable, safeguarded against wind or snow, and simple in comparison of those where we are going. Heat or cold, darkness or light cannot touch it. It was sown in the inner darkness and shines in the inner light. Come, Rosalie, the time is up. We must away to see the sun rise on the new year. Then he led her through those great empty rooms into the fuller ones, where general hilarity preceded the closing of the dance. But here they never waited. Across the palm house to the doors of glass with the image of the toad and temple so finely and so clearly worked in them. At one touch they both flew open, and there, flooded in a tide of light, red, and accompanying silence. It traveled swiftly, yet without sound or violence, into the rooms of feasting and of mirth, carrying silence and a vague alarm. And noting where it came from, the guests instinctively crowded out towards that curious garden on which faced the real front of Marble House. And there, below the terrace steps, upon the wide carriage drive, stood a chariot of gold, with seats of crimson velvet, and harnessed to it the 6 black steeds, with tossing heads and eyes of fire, strong and sleek and slim. One youth alone stood at the foremost bridle, and in the midst of all this ruddy glamour shone the pure whiteness of Rosalie's robe, with all its flimsy showers of lace and jewels. And there beside the carriage steps stood Mariana, the frog upon her shoulder, and with her Everard, who had preceded them. Then Rosalie stepped in lightly and gracefully and sat down. Mariana bent forward, and with the grace peculiar to her arranged the spreading train about her feet. Then looking up with mutual feeling, each drew an arm round the other's neck and kissed. Rosalie whispered, You will follow, Mariana, and we'll meet again in no land of shadows, red or black, but in the sunlight. And you'll bring Everard. A little company along the road is most desirable, but for the present, goodbye. And then the master, gathering the long reins in his hand as he sat down beside her, wrung Everard's hand. And seeing Mariana, he held her hand toward him too, bent over it and kissed it. By that one act, undoing all the past in which she suffered through him. The master shook the reins. 1,000 tingling stars shook from them upon and round about the coal-black steeds. One wild bound forward, all in unison, not on a straight road, but up some climbing steep. Rosalie turned round, and laughing, half in fear and half in happiness, kissed her hand to Brightcoat. Goodbye, till we meet again. Then the master turned round also, a face very unlike to hers. His face was dark and shadowy, as it ever had been. With his free hand he felt in the pocket of the long coat he wore. "I forgot to leave my New Year's presents, Rosalie," said he, and brought out a large handful of precious stones, flinging them down to Lucifram. Then drawing out another, he handed these to Rosalie and bade her throw them too. They fell among the crowd, who gathered them and praised their beauty. But the 6 black steeds, with little apparent effort, climbed up the steep mountainside, or so it seemed to be. And gradually the red light disappeared, and Lucifram along with it, and darkness followed. And now there was nothing but the wind, and icy snow, and loneliness, nothing but the path. Nothing was to be seen on either side. The spirited steeds, wild as ocean foam, flew up and on the mountain track. The winds moaned after them with a song as wild, as full of sad complaint, as if they were embodied spirits of the sighs and tears of broken hearts. But no feeling of cold came near Rosalie. The jeweled robes encased her, proof against everything. And gradually it seemed as if the darkness gave way to a glimmering of light. At first it was feeble, but grew in distinctness, steady and still steadier. Suddenly a ray of brilliant light, light that could never blind the eyes, shot straight across the path. Then came another, following thick and fast from every direction. Swiftly the coal-black horses changed in the flooding light to purest white, visions of inexpressible and perfect beauty. Rosalie's heart beat faster with sudden unexpected joy. She looked up at the master, her own face transfigured by the light, as so was his, for all the weariness, all the contempt, all the shadows had vanished from his features, and left nothing but what was full of life, of vigor, and of kindliness. His eyes, still dark and deep, looked into hers, the first time on the long and perilous journey, and he said, laughing as sometimes of old, "Do you prefer looking at me to the magnificence of all this scenery?" But she clasped his arm in both her hands and leaned her forehead against his shoulder. And suddenly he brought the horses to a check, and drawing her still closer, bent his head and kissed her cheek. Then she looked up with eyes all wet with tears and bright with happiness, and drawing back a little, said, "I never thought that things would come out this way. I never imagined that black horses could come out white, nor you become so altered." He laughed. "It all depends upon the journey that I take. Sometimes I cross upon another rainbow that leads us all downhill from Lucifram at almost breakneck speed. Then neither I nor these, my horses, alter much. But look, Rosalie, round you. This is a scene worth seeing and remembering." He stood up and, giving her his hand, helped her to her feet. And then she saw that streams of light and rainbow garlands were flung from 1,000 spheres to meet the central road, itself a giant rainbow crossing from Lucifram, a tiny speck of gleaming red in the far, far distance, towards a country quite unsurpassed for loveliness. And all around, from the different worlds of light, came scenes of fairyland. And now she saw a towered city folded in night, the change from day, and here the bright sunshine of midday glinting upon a noble river, with sloping tree-clad hills and meadows smooth and green. Again the sun was setting behind a sea of golden glory, on whose restless surface danced 3 round boats inlaid with pearl. And in the boats sat 3 maidens of exquisite beauty, attended by the gentle wind, their servant, who wafted them towards the distant shore. And as they went they sang a song that trembled sweetly on the air, and reached in the soft silence to that golden car, ringing tones of happiness and joy. So on around, 1,000 scenes, and all delightful, delicate yet clear, country and city all in perfection spread out everywhere, and each sphere was linked to each with garlands of lights, so that the nimble spirit crossed on them, a perfect path of beauty. Rosalie looked and breathed a sigh of admiration. Then her eyes traveled to the path which they were crossing. The steep part had been passed. There now remained only a lesser portion, and that sloped gently down. This remaining part was free from danger. Pillars of light garlanded with flowers guarded the sides. The horses, unwearied with the night's long race, moved slowly towards this nearing country, over whose waking sky the bright dawn was spreading wings of glory, with silver flutings right east to west. The descent led to a regal city, where nothing mean or sordid, nor toil and tribulation, no anxious care or killing sorrow, no oppression, no dark deeds, no foul disease, no hardened priests or creeds had ever come. But all was God, the essence of immortal greatness. And to this city came Rosalie, led by him whom some had called on Lucifram the Master. And being all tired with the journey, Rosalie fell asleep just as they were entering the gates. For no traveler from a darker sphere can enter there unweary. The soft air, too strong for them, wafts the frail form to tender sleep, that it undergo the great and immortal change. The sound of laughter and welcome, heaven's truest music of joy, and then for us a silence. So ends a little chapter in the life of Lucifram, a chapter that bore indirectly upon the serpent and helped gradually to its undoing. But that's another tale. The end. End of chapter 35. Read by Christine Rottger, June 7th, 2026, Westford, Massachusetts. End of Jewel Sowers by Edith Allonby.